Hey guys, how's everybody doing? It's me, Rocco, again. Thank you very much for coming back to the channel to check out another classic album review. And today we really do have a classic on our hands. We're talking Uriah Heep's fourth album, their classic 1972, Demons and Wizards. And when people think about Uriah Heep, this album here is usually what pops into mind first. It was their best-selling album, their most popular, and honestly just one of those albums you could just put on any time of day, any day of the week, and just fucking enjoy it. Kind of like the last album, Look at Yourself. But this album here has a totally different feel from that album. And I kind of find it strange how when people review the album, they really say that this was like the solidification of Uriah Heep's classic sound, when I really think that the album preceding this, Look at Yourself, that really had the best of both worlds. It had the heavy, intense organ and guitar dual riffs. It had a lot of amazing ballads. It had the long epics. Really just everything Uriah Heep, at least to me, from my limited experience with the band, were going for. It was kind of like their manifesto of their sound. Now, this album here is absolutely fantastic. I love Demons and Wizards. I really can't put it down. I mean, I've been listening to this album nonstop for the past month. It's just, or maybe even a bit longer now. And I'm kind of obsessed with it. It's such a great album. It gets better and better with repeated listens. But I think that this album here is a little bit different than what they were doing. It's a little bit on the folkier side, a little bit on the more mystical side. The musicianship is still fantastic. But this one here is really grounded in these huge, larger-than-life climactic musical passages and folky kind of sing-along, infectious choruses and hooks. I mean, this album here is just extremely catchy. You can't go wrong. Whereas the previous album was a little bit darker, a little more intense, a little bit more of the proto-metal kind of sound. This album here, I would really struggle to call it proto-metal. This is just mystical hard rock. That's really the best way I can describe it. And it kind of baffles me how people say, this is like the sound of Uriah Heep. And again, I haven't heard every album. I'm up to The Magician's Birthday now. And I gotta say, from what I've heard so far, this album here, this might be controversial. I enjoy this album a lot more than Magician's Birthday. And, Magician's Birthday is a great album. It has plenty of fantastic songs. Sunrise, Echoes in the Dark, Tales, and the final track, Magician's Birthday. They're all great songs. But I think that this one here just stands way above it. And again, people really compare this and really say that this and Magician's Birthday are like their two best albums. And in my opinion, I disagree. I really think that from Salisbury up to this album, man, that was just an era of flawless masterpieces for Uriah Heep. Not one weak track among those three albums. And if you guys watch my previous video, Look at Yourself, you'll know that my absolute favorite Uriah Heep album is Salisbury. And that's kind of just a personal taste. I'm a big progressive rock fan. But I would say, objectively speaking, Look at Yourself is their best. And this one here is really close as well. I mean, there's nothing negative I can even say about this album. It's just, the flow is amazing. It's catchy. It's melodic. Honestly, anyone could get into this album. It's just such an easy listen, but in a good way. And really, this is the album to really introduce fans of that are just getting into classic rock, into hard rock music. I would say this is a great place to start because it has a little bit of that adventurous kind of mystical side to it. So it's kind of like a gateway into the more progressive stuff for the true beginners. But even for a seasoned veteran of classic rock and progressive rock music, this is an extremely enjoyable listen. And, it has been referred to as a progressive rock album. And I don't know if I would call it that, to be honest. It does have some progressive leanings towards it with the song structures, especially the last song, Paradise / The Spell. That's a magnum opus in my opinion. But for the most part, the songs are pretty straightforward in structure and don't draw on too many outside influences. So I wouldn't call this a progressive rock album at all, to be honest with you. At least compared to stuff like Salisbury and Look at Yourself. Even Look at Yourself, I wouldn't necessarily call that. But yeah, just a great album, a classic from 1972. And really, Uriah Heep, one of their most popular albums. So now let's get into the history behind the album as always, and then we'll talk about my overall review. All right, guys, so just a little bit of background behind Demons and Wizards. So let's start off at the end of the recording of Look at Yourself. So the band went on tour, and I think this was their first tour of America. It was a really big tour. Again, they were opening for some pretty big bands at the time, playing some arenas and everything. Really their first taste of success. And of course, the U.S. embraced them with open arms because the United States was big on hard rock in the early 70s. There's no denying that. I mean, look at Zeppelin breaking the all-time attendance records, and Deep Purple was huge there. Sabbath was there. Even camped out in California at the time, made their classic album Volume 4. It was a big scene back then. So Uriah Heep was welcomed with open arms, and they had a pretty grueling tour schedule there. And a few of the members of the band were feeling a little bit disenfranchised, a little bit disillusioned with the whole Uriah Heep thing, because according to Uriah Heep's website, it was clear that the nucleus of the band, really the three major contributors were Mick Box, vocalist David Byron, but most of all, predominantly Ken Hensley was really the one leading the band creatively and musically. He was the one writing the main melodies of most of the tracks, and the other members of the band, Paul Newton, who'd been in the band pretty much from the start, and drummer Ian Clark, who had just been on Look at Yourself. They were feeling like outsiders at this point. Again, they were exhausted, and Paul Newton, there was a lot of stress going on between him and the band because his father actually managed the band before they moved on to Gary Braun, their longtime manager and producer. And yeah, there was just some resentment over that because when they went for Gary Braun, their father kind of got shafted. His father kind of got shafted, and there was arguments about money and owing money to him and things like that. And it just left a bitter taste in Paul Newton's mouth. Also, he got into a car accident on tour, and yeah, he was just getting kind of disillusioned, exhausted from the touring schedule. Feeling like an outsider from the band. So he ended up leaving the band, and honestly, it was kind of a relief. He had collapsed on stage at one point, and then after that, the band kind of let him go. And he even said like he wanted to leave the band even before Look at Yourself, but didn't have the balls to do it. So he finally left. Obviously, his heart wasn't in it. But I got to say, guys, Paul Newton was a fantastic bass player. I don't think he gets enough credit. I mean, when I listen to songs like Salisbury and a lot of the tracks on Look at Yourself, the bass really stands out for me. And I think he's really overshadowed by Gary Thayne, who would end up replacing him for this album. But Paul Newton, the solid bass player, and I don't really know what he went on to do after Uriah Heep. Probably went off into obscurity. But I think his time with Heep was good and productive. I mean, his bass playing is great. Also, at around the same time, Ian Clark, their drummer, who had just appeared on Look at Yourself, good performance on that album, by the way. He decided to leave as well, again, feeling kind of out of place in the band. So the band was doing a bit of restructuring, and the shitty thing was this was kind of in the middle of the tour, of their North American tour, and they had to make some quick changes. So replacing Ian Clark, they got the former God's drummer, Lee Kerslake, who would end up being a long-time Uriah Heep drummer, and a fantastic player, I might add. A really heavy melodic drum sound coming from him. And as we all know, Ken Hensley was also in the band The Gods, so they had a history going on there, and really just, they gelled really well. And then they got a bass player named, I believe his name was Mark Clark or something, but he wouldn't really stay in the band for long. He was kind of a temporary solution before they finally settled on Gary Thayne, who is considered the best bass player in the band. The best bass player Uriah Heep ever had, and the best musician in the band, according to their manager Gary Braun. And yeah, you know what? I actually really agree with that because his bass playing on this album is absolutely incredible. And again, nothing against Paul Newton, who was a pretty good bass player as well, but he's got nothing on Gary Thayne. I mean, this dude here, his bass lines are just, again, I'm going to use the word again, melodic, because really, he's not just following the riffs or just laying down these simple, funky grooves. He's playing his own melody in the background, or I should say in the foreground, because his bass is really, really prominent on the album and really drives a lot of the tracks. And even during the softer, more melodic sections, he shines as well, just as well as he does in the faster, more up-tempo parts of the album. So incredible bass player. You're going to notice a really big jump up in quality with the bass on the album. And I think that was like the final piece in the puzzle of Uriah Heep because his performance is just stellar. And the band went to the studio. They really, really gelled. I mean, this was kind of the classic lineup of Uriah Heep that would last for a while until, unfortunately, Gary Thayne would die of a drug overdose. He was fired first, and then not even a year later, the guy passed away from a heroin overdose or something like that. Just a tragedy. Same with David Byron. He would end up passing away in the 80s from alcoholism. So a lot of drug problems with the band. But at this point, none of that was really happening. The whole band was just gelling, and there was a lot of chemistry between them. So they entered the studio, recorded and released this album here, Demons and Wizards, and it was met with pretty much universal critical acclaim. The album did fantastic. It went to number 20 in the UK, number 23 in the US, which is incredible. And the single Easy Livin' from the album went all the way to number 39, which was their highest charting hit ever in their entire career. So really, according to according to Ken Hensley, this album here was kind of the pinnacle of Uriah Heep in terms of their commercial success. But arguably, as well as the music, like if you like more of the softer side of Uriah Heep, this album is definitely going to be your favorite. And yeah, it's probably their most accessible as well. So a really good album, a really strong release from the band, and the first of their kind of classic lineup, as it would be known as, because finally they would keep a drummer for more than one album, with Lee Kerslake contributing to their next, goddamn, I think like at least like their next 6-7 albums, at least until the 80s when they would break up briefly. But yeah, it's awesome. And of course, with the album, Ken Hensley really did a lot of the work on the album with the writing and composing of the tracks. He was kind of the creative genius behind the band. But yeah, that's just the way it went. Like, he always had so many songs in the bank, and the band were happy with that. I mean, there were no complaints. I don't think Mick Box and David Byron really minded that Ken Hensley was doing the bulk of the writing. They were just kind of going with the flow on this album, at least. I think later on they might have resented that a bit, but at the time, it was just a happy family, and the recording of the album was apparently really fun and really peaceful for the band, in contrast to past albums where there was a little bit of tension, a little bit of conflict, and of course future albums with all the drug problems and money got in the way. Money always fucks everything up, but yeah, this was a very nice, stable time for the band and very commercially successful. Also, you got to give credit to Roger Dean for his classic album artwork on this album. In contrast to a lot of Roger Dean's earlier album covers, like we're talking Yes and other bands as well, he actually painted this one, whereas with those other bands he would kind of draw it and then kind of fill in the blanks with the paint. This one here was just kind of a free-form painting, and fuck, let me tell you guys, it's such an awesome album cover. I love the blue color palette it has, the starry night in the background, and that brightness that just emanates from the center. A very mystical album cover, an album title, to say the least. And, a little bit on the nerdy side, like Demons and Wizards, it does sound like some kind of nerdy board game or a novel or something like that. But the music contained within is anything but. I mean, this is just accessible to everybody. And yeah, but you got to mention the album artwork, because that's really kind of the highlight of the album. Definitely the best album cover in Uriah Heep's entire discography, along with The Magician's Birthday. And, I'm a really big fan of Salisbury as well. I think that tank on the cover is just so awesome. But artistically speaking, I got to say this is probably the greatest Uriah Heep album cover. And again, how can you go wrong with Roger Dean as your artist? I mean, it's awesome. But yeah, it gives the album kind of this progressive rock kind of feel to it. But don't worry, this isn't like a dense, impenetrable prog album. This is just really just, you can listen to it any time of day. Awesome album. So now, let me review this bad boy, and then we'll talk about each song track by track. Alright guys, so what can you possibly say about Demons and Wizards? It really is just a classic album. Again, often regarded to be the greatest album by the band, and I could definitely see where people are coming from. This is such a melodic album. The flow between the tracks is just perfect. This really is an album that you have to listen to from start to finish. I just love how the songs flow in and out of each other, and it has this cohesive feel to it, this majestic, powerful feel that runs through the entire album, just extremely climactic, and it's just such a cohesive album. So maybe in that sense, it probably is Uriah Heep's best album in terms of cohesion and working as a whole, really, instead of a collection of songs. And we've seen that a lot in the past, especially Uriah Heep's first album, and to a lesser extent, the second album, Salisbury. It did feel like a collection of these different kind of eclectic styles. Then on at Look at Yourself, they kind of honed down on their classic sound, but this one here really really maintains the same feel throughout. And there's a lot of variety as well. I'm not saying that this album just sounds bland from start to finish with the same kind of songs, but it has these musical elements that just run through the entire thing. So for that reason alone, I can definitely see why people consider this the pinnacle of Uriah Heep. And there's just something about it. I really think Roger Dean's artwork has something to do with it. It has that alluring kind of look to it. Whereas Look at Yourself, let's be honest, guys, it's kind of a shitty album cover. Sure, it was cool with the whole foil mirror in the front and everything, but yeah, it just doesn't have that creativity behind it, that artistic nature to it. And again, with the song titles and the lyrics and everything, it has this fantasy-inspired kind of feel to it, which probably drew in a lot of the progressive rock audience at the time, which I think is why people consider it a progressive rock album. And it's true, like a lot of the tracks here do deal with mystical themes. There's a track called The Wizard, Poet's Justice, What else do we got on here? The Spell, the Prophet, all these kind of weird mystical themes, Rainbow Demon, and but yeah, the music itself is pretty self-explanatory, pretty straightforward. But again, very powerful. So I just want to get that out of the way. This isn't a concept album, although there are a lot of fantasy lyrics running through the goddamn thing. It's definitely not a concept album. And Ken Hensley said it himself in the liner notes. This is just a collection of songs that they recorded, and just so happen to have some mystical lyrics thrown in. So don't worry if you're not a fan of concept albums. Now let's talk about the music on the album, which is really the most important thing here. Again, this album's awesome. It adds a lot of things, and it takes away from a lot of things that were developed on Look at Yourself. For one thing, it's a lot less heavy. That's the one thing you're going to notice about it. Look at Yourself had songs like Shadows of Grief, the title track, Love Machine, songs like that with these fast-paced, up-tempo, barnstorming, heavy riff and organ duo-driven tracks. And on this track, on this album, you don't really get a lot of that. You get a little bit here and there with the track Easy Livin' and things like that. But it's a lot lighter. It's a lot on the lighter side. So if you're into that heavy proto-metal stuff, this album might disappoint you a bit. Because, yeah, it does lack a little bit on the intensity compared to Look at Yourself. So I could totally see where some of the disappointment will come in. But this album adds a whole lot, guys. It's just from start to finish. Such a majestic, such a powerful moment. It has those huge sing-along choruses, beautiful harmonies that they retained from the past, and this kind of folky, mystical vibe to it. A lot more acoustic guitar playing on the album as well, interspersed with the electric guitar. The slide guitar comes back, and let me tell you guys, Ken Hensley, he's known as being the organist, the keyboard player, and composer of the band, but his slide guitar plays such a prominent role in the band's sound, and there's this moment on The Spell, the last track on the album. It is just so magical. Ken Hensley performs probably his most climactic Pink Floyd style slide guitar solo. Very David Gilmour style solo. So if you're a huge fan of David Gilmour, you're going to absolutely love his playing on this album. But Mick Box as well. His playing on this album is a little bit more restrained. He does contribute a lot to like the big climaxes on the album. And that's the thing I want to get across. This album here has a lot of these powerful, majestic climaxes on a lot of the tracks, and Mick Box really plays a prominent role in that. But throughout the songs, you'll notice that he doesn't really have those heavy, crunchy riffs, with a few exceptions here and there. He's more just kind of playing to suit the music, and that's the thing about the album here. It does feel very song oriented. It doesn't really wander off into any long instrumental stretches, again, except for that part on The Spell later on the track. It really just focuses in on the core harmonies and melodies that make up the track. So you're not going to get like huge epic songs on the album. Usually the songs run between 3 and 5 minutes. There is one exception at the end, again, with The Spell, that epic 7 to 8 minute long track. And some people combine it with The Prophet and say it's one long epic, but there's really nothing in common between those two, so I don't know why people combine those. Apparently it was intended to be like this one long epic, but I don't know. I don't feel it. I don't see it that way. But yeah, the songs are much shorter, way more succinct, to the point, and you do get a few rockers in between. This album isn't all just majestic through and through. Of course, you got Easy Livin', which is just this up-tempo, churning rocker that could have easily have been on the previous album, as well as another song on side 2, which we'll get to later. So there is some more straightforward, dumb rock, if you want to call it that, to intersperse between the tracks. But you're never going to get that heavy Hammond organ and heavy guitar assault that you had on the previous few albums. But yeah, it's just great. David Byron, his vocals as always are absolutely amazing on this album. He gets into the falsetto range a few times on the album, but he's not just screaming at the top of his lungs like he did on, especially on the Salisbury album, quite a few times. He's more restrained, more in the mid-tempo, and uses his softer kind of voice much more than he did on previous albums. And I love his soft, sultry, crooning voice. It's absolutely fantastic. The whole band is just on fire on the album. And again, I already mentioned Gary Thane's bass performance earlier on the album. It's just a huge part of the album. You can't think of Demons and Wizards without thinking of the fantastic bass playing by Gary Thane. Again, driving a lot of the tracks. And, man, such a shame he had to die of an overdose in the 70s. This guy could have gone on to be considered one of the greatest bass players of all time. And yeah, on this album here, he never really jumps out and plays aggressive, fast bass lines, like something like Geddy Lee would do or Chris Squire. But But that doesn't mean his bass performance isn't amazing. It just fits the music perfectly. And ironically speaking, there's a bonus track on the CD version I have on Spotify called Why, which is this 10-minute bass extravaganza where he is playing aggressively. And, I could see why they didn't put it on the album. It doesn't really fit with the whole mystical atmosphere of this thing. But, damn, he's really just beating the shit out of that bass. And if you want to hear Gary Thane going nuts on his instrument, I definitely recommend you check out that song. It's just 10 minutes of sheer bass excellence. Lee Kerslake's drumming is really solid as well on the album. And I love how, his drumming really gives the album that element of heaviness, even though it has all these acoustic kind of folk-driven passages. He's still bashing the shit out of those drums. Really good drummer. He would later go on to be an Ozzy Osbourne solo band for a few albums, the best albums, and getting apparently got fucked over with the with the royalties from that thing. But anyway, so yeah, the whole band is just really firing on all cylinders. It's just a perfect experience. So if you guys want an album, a little bit on the lighter side, but with fantastic, extremely memorable melodies, powerful vocals, emotional climaxes from Mick Box's guitar and Ken Hensley's slide and organ, and just an album that focuses a lot on the songwriting and less on, jam sessions and everything. A little bit more accessible. There's less abrupt changes in the music, less strange song structures here and there. Then this is the album for you. If you like those things, then this is just perfect album. So yeah, Demons and Wizards, definitely a classic. A very addictive listen. I mean, there's no way you could just listen to this album once. Once you hear it for the first time, trust me, you're going to be listening to it for weeks on end because it's just so infectious. And really just one of those albums that every classic rock fan should own. So definitely recommend the album. Now let's talk about the album track by track. So starting off the album, we get The Wizard. Kind of what I consider the title track of the entire thing. It was one of the singles released for the album, and it's just such a fantastic song. It's only 3 minutes in length and really just keeps the same melody throughout, but I just love how this song just builds as it goes, as it progresses. It gets a little bit heavier and heavier and heavier from its very folk-driven acoustic intro, and it's great. The vocals on this track just really stand out. The falsetto harmonies, David Byron's awesome vocals at the beginning, very sing-along, very, surrounding a campfire kind of thing going on here. And again, very mystical, majestic song. I absolutely love it. It starts off, again, just acoustically for the first minute, but there's this nice bottom end to the acoustic guitar here, giving it like a little touch of heaviness, and David Byron's classic vocals come in, just very folk-driven here. But then 1 minute in, his vocals start speeding up, and it does this weird kind of effect to it, and it's kind of strange. It kind of annoyed me at first, but now I'm used to it. And then the drums and bass kick in, and the whole song kind of just picks up, and it has this awesome groove to it. We got some electric guitar kind of really in the background. The acoustic is still going throughout the entire song, so don't get me wrong there. But the electric guitar starts coming out of the shadows there, as well as Ken Hensley's organ playing. And it's awesome. And then after the third verse, the guitar really comes out, giving this nice crunchy riff in the background. I just love how it progresses, and the harmonies are just awesome. We get, again, that falsetto kind of harmonization that would really inspire Queen. And we're in, 72 now? So Queen was just around the corner at this point. And damn, this must have been a huge inspiration for them. And man, you gotta just love the harmonies on this track. It's a beautiful song with a nice heavy edge given by Mick Box's electric guitar and Lee Kerslake's really steady drumming on the song, as well as the bass work. The bass work's really good. So a great way to open the album, kind of a taste of what's to come. You got the best of both worlds on this one, and The Wizard's definitely a classic. In terms of a rating, man, it's just so short. It's only 3 minutes long, but it's so good. I'm going to have to give it a 9 out of 10, guys. It's such an enjoyable listen. So track number 2, Traveler in Time. This is another short 3-minute tune, and it's extremely catchy. I mean, this is a definite earworm. One of the catchier tracks on the album. Not one of my absolute favorites on the album, but it's a great song nonetheless. Really cool track. Very funky. Gary Thane's bass playing throughout is absolutely incredible, just laying down those grooves, as well as Mick Box's wah-wah guitar, which really runs throughout the entire track. And those two elements combined give it this kind of like funky groove, which I really love. And the vocals on the track are great as well. Byron sings solo, but during the verses we get these kind of soft, psychedelic kind of harmonies, falsetto harmonies from the band, which is really cool, especially combined with the wah-wah guitar. But it does pick up the pace during the chorus, and the intro is really energetic. It's just this burst of energy with this heavy kind of riff and the wah-wah guitar, kind of giving you a little bit of a burst after The Wizard, which was kind of this laid-back kind of track. But again, that intro there is kind of misleading because you think it's going to be heavier than it actually ends up being, but still a great intro nonetheless. And I love the ending of the song. There's this awesome kind of stop and start guitar solo that alternates with the main groove of the track. And I really like that. It's a cool way to end the song. And really melodic, really catchy. Just a groovy song. Like, there's nothing else really to say about it. Traveler in Time, probably a strong 8.5 out of 10. I don't know if that's being too generous or not generous enough. But I really enjoy Traveler in Time. Again, we're still getting our feet wet with these first few tracks on the album. The greatness really starts with the fourth song. But the first three tracks are amazing nonetheless. So, Traveler in Time gets a big thumbs up. Man, speaking of short and sweet songs, this album here really crams them all at the beginning. Because the next song here, Easy Livin', is a 2.5-minute barnstorming rocker. And funny enough, the most well-known Uriah Heep song, and arguably one of their most simple. You know, this is a song that, when I review albums like this, I usually say, yeah, this is kind of just the simple tune on the album. You hear it a few times, you never need to hear it again. But that is not the case with Easy Livin'. I fucking love this song. I mean, it's just awesome. It hits the spot every single time I hear the album. And it's great. It really is the only song on the album that really brings back that chugging riffage combined with Ken Hensley's up-tempo organ playing, and it just creates this driving groove to it. Gary Thane's awesome bass helps matters as well. And it's just a really pumping, rocking track. And I could totally see why this was a big hit in the European continent. And even in the US, I think this was their highest charting single. Yeah, it definitely was. I think I mentioned it earlier in the video, I just can't remember. But yeah, very good song. And I love how it still has those falsetto harmonies, especially in the middle of the track, giving it that lighter, more mystical edge that the whole album had. So this is what I was talking about earlier, when I said that there's a lot of variety on the album, but it makes use of those same kind of musical tools and cliches throughout many of the different tracks, giving it this cohesive feel. So although this is a barnstorming, up-tempo rocking track, it still has that more folky vibe with those falsetto harmonized vocals. Just a great song, a very addictive song. I would give this an 8.5 out of 10. Not much more to say about it, but yeah, just a very simple rocking tune that never gets old. Alright guys, so starting with track 4 onward, this album here goes into a perfect run of tracks. Just absolutely phenomenal quality from here on out. And that's not to say that the first 3 songs weren't great, but you know, they were a little bit shorter, a little bit more on the simplistic side. Starting with Poet's Justice, these tracks bring a lot more to the table. And I freaking love Poet's Justice. It's a fantastic song. Just gotta say, Gary Thane's bass playing really drives this entire track. I mean, man, his bass lines are absolutely pumping on this track. And you could really tell that, you know, Paul Newton, although he was a great bass player, he wasn't really doing stuff like this. Gary Thane was kind of on another level, but yeah, fantastic bass performance here. Love how it kicks off with these angelic harmonies just coming in, and but what I love about it is Lee Kerslake is playing this fucking funky groove in the background during this angelic opening to the track. And you wouldn't think it would fit together, but it does perfectly. Just this great, tight, funky groove that he plays. Then he gets into the main melody of the track, which is, again, very strong, addictive, memorable. And I love how David Byron's vocals are really at the forefront of the song. Although there is harmonization, kind of repeating the same lyrics he's singing, he's kind of in the front and they're in the back. Whereas on the previous tracks of the album, the vocals did kind of all blend together. Here I like how David Byron really stands above the pack. And Mick Box is just playing this nice kind of sharp guitar riff in the background. Kind of has this heavier edge to it, but I wouldn't really call it a chugging riff. And the organs in the background, not really at the forefront here, just laying down a little bit of the background scenery, but pretty awesome. And I love when the chorus kicks in, and when David Byron sings, "Rain came and took them away." I love the harmonies in the background, the oohs and ahs and all that. It just gives it that amazing kind of epic quality to it that would have been lacking without Uriah Heep's signature melodies. and the bass playing, especially on especially on the chorus of the track, just totally steals the show. It's hard to focus on David Byron with that incredible bass playing in the background. And but my favorite part of the song comes at the 2-minute 28-second mark, where we get really the first big climactic part on the album, where Mick Box comes out with this incredible guitar solo. It has this weird kind of slur to it at the end of the line, and something that we haven't really heard from Mick Box yet, and it just gives it this really powerful climactic moment there. And then we get a brief sharp organ solo, and then the big moment of the album. The whole band comes in with that amazing scream, the ah. I'm no singer, as you guys can tell, but it's a really, really powerful moment. And it gets really energetic at this point. There's a nice trade-off between the guitar and organ, which we hadn't really seen since the previous album, Look at Yourself, which is a really cool throwback to their more conventional sound. Then it goes back to the main melody, ends off with the angelic harmonies that opened up the track. It's just, everything just fits into place with this song. And again, it's only 4 minutes in length, but it's perfect. It's such a great tune. Easily a 9 out of 10. Maybe, yeah, I wouldn't give it a 9.5, but it's easily a 9 out of 10. It's a great track, and again, from here on out, the album just maintains this level of sheer excellence. Closing off side one of the best Uriah Heep songs, hands down, for me at least. Circle of Hands. Oh my god, guys, I don't even know what to say about this song. I love it that much. It's just such a powerful, emotional, spiritual track. Every member of the band is on fire. Literally, Mick Box, I can name all the members of the band. They're absolutely performing at their zenith on this track. And, I would be hard-pressed to pick a favorite song on the album, but this would definitely be up there. Either number 2 or maybe even number 1. But there's a lot of strong contenders on side 2. But yeah, Circle of Hands is a fantastic song. 2 really powerful moments on the track that just give me goosebumps every single time. One from Mick Box and one from Ken Hensley. But yeah, just this song here just screams spiritual. It has a kind of church-going vibe to it, kind of a gospel ring to it as well. It's just absolutely fantastic. Starts off with this really powerful organ melody that's kind of like the main riff of the entire track. It goes through most of the song, and it sounds very church-like, very spiritual again, very atmospheric. And it sounds like something else as well, guys. If you listen carefully, a certain song from 1969 called "The Court of the Crimson King" from King Crimson. It's pretty similar. It's pretty similar. I'm not going to say they ripped them off, but it does follow a similar kind of progression to it. But it's definitely not a rip-off. I mean, it's just maybe they were inspired. Let's just put it that way. But yeah, it's a really powerful riff. But then before the bass and drums kick in, and man, the bass playing on this track is freaking amazing. Just listen to that bass just pummeling the entire song. Gary Thane, again, what a fantastic bass player. Just a noticeable difference in the bass playing on this album again. And then it winds down again back into the church organ, and we get David Byron's soft crooning vocals come in. I love when he does this style of vocals. On the previous album, there's always at least 1 or 2 tracks on each album so far from Uriah Heep that had this style of vocals, and this is the one on this album, and it's absolutely beautiful. The drum and bass part kicks in, and the whole song just elevates this powerful melody. And then on the second verse, we have some absolutely gospel choirs in the background, just giving it that climactic edge to it. And the vocals in the background, the harmonies, they aren't falsetto at this point. They're very, during the chorus, I should say, they're very kind of sing-along, like what we heard on the song The Wizard, the first track on the album. So again, just showing their versatility with their harmonies. They aren't always falsetto, which is kind of a misconception with Uriah Heep. But the first powerful climactic moment comes in at the 3-minute mark when Mick Box just comes in with this powerful, amazing goosebump-inducing guitar solo that just intensifies. And then we even get a twin guitar sound. I'm not sure if Ken Hensley's also playing slide in the background. It's kind of hard to tell, but absolutely fantastic. Then after that amazing, powerful climax, it kicks back into the chorus, and the song kind of just goes through, what it went through in the first couple minutes until we get to the amazing outro. And they really let this thing ride out, guys. I mean, the outro of this song is at least 2 minutes, and it's just such an emotional part of the album. Definitely one of the best moments on the entire album. It starts off with this kind of heavier Mick Box riff, But then before you know it, Ken Hensley comes in with his fantastic slide guitar playing, reprising the main organ riff that he was playing throughout the entire track. So you could picture the dude stepping away from the organ, picking up a slide guitar, and it's just such a fucking amazing climax. Again, the bass on that section is just so powerful. And we even get some piano coming in during this section, just creating this cacophony of excellence. Man, Circle of Hands. The first time I heard the album, this song didn't really like jump out at me. But the more and more I listen to it, the more I realize how much of a masterpiece this track is. It's easily a 9.5 out of 10. I wouldn't give it a 10 because, it's not like one of the best songs ever. But a 9.5 is definitely a fair score for it. So definitely the best track on the album so far. But the goodness continues, guys. Oh yeah, kicking off side 2 of the album, we get an excellent song, another strong contender for best track on the album. I would still put Circle of Hands above this and the final track, which we'll get to. But Rainbow Demon is such a great song. It's such an awesome, atmospheric, smoky, slow burning tune with a creepy, ominous edge to it and a heaviness that a lot of the other tracks don't have. And it's driven by Ken Hensley's, I want to say, iconic organ melody. It's just great. It's just so slow and haunting and has kind of like an oriental feel to it in a sense, but I don't know, maybe that's just me hearing things, but it's awesome and it has this great weight to it. It just goes through the entire song. Again, this track here doesn't go through many changes. It's all about the main melody. It's all about the main kind of meat and potatoes of the song. It doesn't really, if this was on Look at Yourself or Salisbury, they would have wandered off into some crazy experimental territory like they did on the song Shadows of Grief. But here they keep it really short, and Rainbow Demon's only 4 minutes. Man, when David Byron's vocals come in, it just creates this ominous atmosphere, and I love how his voice gets more powerful as it progresses throughout this track, and it's great, and the drums pick up, the guitar intensifies in the background, and it's just kind of like this slow build. Then we get the first chorus, which is, brings a little bit of those elements throughout the entire album with the kind of sing-along harmony to it. I love how they sing Rainbow Demon with this kind of almost vibrato effect on the harmony there. I love that. So yeah, a more sing-along, accessible part of the tune. That kind of detracts a little bit from the heaviness and the atmosphere that it was building up. But it's a great, accessible chorus. I can't really complain there. And the bass also gets more complex as it goes along as well. It starts off just very simple, just following the organ riff, but then later on, it just, it's doing its own thing. Gary Thane, man, great freaking bass player. My favorite part of the track is at the 3-minute mark when Mick Box comes in with this smoky, intense guitar solo. And it's just such a slow burn, and I absolutely love it. Just has this ballsiness, this weight to it. And with like the keyboard still going on, the organ still going in the background, it's a great effect right there. Then it comes back in with the chorus, and they really let the chorus ride out, closing out the track. Again, love the chorus, how they sing Rainbow Demon, and later on in the track, you'll notice that during the chorus, there's a few like vocal effects in the background where the band's going hoo ha, or something like that in the background, which it's kind of funny, to be honest. Kind of a little bit on the cheesy side, but I like it. So yeah, Rainbow Demon, it's a classic tune. Easily a 9 out of 10. Easily. Maybe a 9.5. If I had a gun to my head today, I would say a 9, but some days I feel a 9.5. It's an amazing track. Now, coming after that string of incredibly, emotional, powerful tunes, we get the funnest track on the entire album, All My Life. I freaking love this song, guys. It's just this short 2-minute, 40-second, bluesy, rockin', just this really strange song with some absolutely over-the-top David Byron vocals. It's just such a fun tune on the album, and really kind of like the palate cleanser before we dive into the epic closing tracks on this thing. But yeah, freaking awesome. Really driven by Ken Hensley's slide guitar playing. This bluesy riff opens up the song and kind of has this fun stop and start feel to it. And then the slide guitar kicks in, and we get into David Byron singing this very rockin', very punchy kind of simplistic rock tune. But there's some honky-tonk piano going on. It's just a great time. Then right when you think the song, is just going to stay in that vein, we get into this amazing angelic harmony when the whole band comes in with I will love you all my life. And it's hilarious. It's so psychedelic. It's very 60s. And you wouldn't expect that coming after this rock and bluesy tune. But it's freaking awesome. I love that. I love that line there, that melody. Very 60s style. But then the best part of the track happens with David Byron just sings over that with the most over the top vocals on the album. It's actually hilarious. It's so over the top, it's hilarious. Really funny shit. He's just going nuts at the end of the track, just ad-libbing, and oh man, awesome song. All My Life, easily an 8.5 out of 10. I love it. All right, guys, now we get into the more epic side of the album. The closing tracks, Paradise and The Spell, which apparently are supposed to work together as one long, like 12-minute epic track. And, to be honest with you guys, there isn't really anything in common, as I mentioned earlier, between Paradise and The Spell. So I'm going to be reviewing them as two separate tracks. But either way you want to slice and dice it, these two tracks are absolutely fantastic. Paradise is just this slow-burning, laid-back, atmospheric, melodic song. It's absolutely amazing. I love everything about it. And The Spell is just something else entirely, which we'll get into. Really, the only thing connecting them is that they seamlessly go into it from one song to another. But it's not like the greatest transition, to be honest. So even that is kind of, separating the two tunes. But yeah, Paradise, what can you say about it? It's an acoustic-driven song, opens up with the acoustic guitar, which was kind of a running theme on side one of the album. But it's really melodic, laid back, really slow tempo. The drums and bass kick in. And I gotta say, Gary Thane's bass playing, when people say he's a melodic bass player, just this is what they're talking about. His bass adds so much to the track here. And the drums are fantastic. And then David Byron comes in with these absolutely dreamy vocals, kind of like similar to Come Away Melinda. Very soft, but different than Circle of Hands. Circle of Hands, he sounded more gospel, more soulful. Here he just sounds dreamy and almost like psychedelic at that point. He does intensify the vocals at some points, but for the most part, it's this dreamy, atmospheric kind of intro. Then things change. The 3-minute, 10-second mark, the whole track starts getting into this awesome build-up, and man, the last 2 minutes of the song are absolutely incredible. It starts off with this weird kind of electronic-sounding piano riff that comes in, and again, the acoustic guitars are still going in the background, but it's this weird, like, it's just this simple, like, kind of clicking sound, if you can even call it that. But it intensifies. The acoustic guitars build up, the bass builds up, the drum builds up. And then before you know it, Mick Box even comes in with this doomy guitar riff. And it's strange to hear this doomy riff with the acoustics and everything going on in the background. I love how they create these epic climaxes where different instruments join in and intensify. And David Byron really shines on this section with his vocals. Again, his vocals building and building and building. And it's fantastic. But then it just kind of like fades out and then transitions into The Spell. I would have loved for there to be like some kind of guitar epic solo at the end of this track. But it's just perfect the way it is anyway, so I can't complain. Definitely one of the stronger songs on the album if you want to like separate it from The Spell. In terms of a score, it's between a 9 to a 9.5. So again, one of those tracks kind of like Rainbow Demon level quality, but not quite as good as Circle of Hands, still in my opinion. Closing off this incredible album, we get the 7.5-minute epic song, and I really mean epic, The Spell. And guys, the more and more I listen to this song, the better and better it gets. This is honestly, guys, at this point, my favorite Uriah Heep song, right up there with Salisbury. I can't decide between those two, but man, I would definitely take this song over July Morning, and I know that's controversial, but I really think that this truly is a better song. And I've heard a lot of criticisms of it, like it's choppy and like the transitions are kind of shitty, but I completely disagree. I think that every millisecond of this song is fantastic, and the middle 5 minutes of the track, oh my fucking god, guys, one of the most powerful moments, not only in Uriah Heep's history, but in music history. It's just one of those just larger-than-life climactic moments. And right when you think it's over, it just keeps going and going in the best possible way. One of the best songs ever. And Ken Hensley himself even says that out of all the Uriah Heep epics, this was the best. And yeah, I agree with Ken Hensley. This is definitely the best. And I know that's controversial. I know this song isn't as highly regarded as July Morning and Salisbury and all those tracks, but I think it deserves its place among the giants. It's just fantastic. Now, it starts off with this really upbeat, rocking, fun, jaunty kind of rhythm that it felt kind of anticlimactic, especially after that amazing build-up at the end of Paradise. And when I first heard it for the first minute of the song, I was like, oh man, like it was just getting so epic. But then the song just takes a complete, change in mood. But over time, I've grown to really love the intro and outro of the song, which is just that really jaunty, fun rock and beat. And I absolutely love the falsetto choruses. Again, it sounds very 60s, very psychedelic. And it's just a fun way to start the track. It really shows that, Uriah Heep wasn't a band that took themselves seriously, like a lot of the other prog bands, if you want to call them that, or hard rock bands. Like they were willing to juxtapose this fun, upbeat rhythm with the epic shenanigans they would end up getting into with the rest of the song. But yeah, it's awesome. And you could tell when the piano stops, when the honky-tonk kind of piano stops and the organ comes in at the end of that section, shit's going to hit the fan. And then at the 1 minute 26 second mark, it completely stops. And we get into this awesome classical piano melody. Really, the first time in a while I could think I've heard a classical piano section. And it's just powerful. And then before you know it, Ken Hensley comes in with arguably the greatest slide guitar he's ever, maybe not the most musically complex, but definitely the most powerful emotional climax on the entire album. And one of his best slide guitar performances. He completely steals the show. And it is just the epitome of epicness, guys. I mean, it doesn't get any better than this. And it just keeps going and going. And then we get an angelic choir in the background just adding to it. And the choir just builds and builds, and it gets louder and louder. And the bass in this section is just as melodic as ever. And sounds like very David Gilmour-esque, very Pink Floyd style slide guitar playing. And it just goes on for quite a while till the 3 minute 40 second mark. It crashes back into the original piano melody. And then we get, Mick Box's classic wah-wah guitar coming in. And David Byron's dreamy vocals just totally taking over the song, but it gets more and more powerful as it goes on. It's dreamy and it gets more and more intense. And then we get another climax with the piano reprising David Byron's vocal line there, and the organ kicks in. It's just, no. I don't know what to say about it, guys. And then the second verse of that section, the angelic choir comes back in. It's literally like climax after climax after climax. And you guys know how I am with music. I love those big, powerful, symphonic moments. Yes, Genesis, I can name countless prog bands. So that's one thing they have in common. But it's so accessible, so easy to get into. And then at the 6 minute mark, it gets back into the fun rhythm, and that started it off, and it's just great. It really ends off with a bang with David Byron's vocals just, getting really out there, really climactic. It's just, wow, guys. The Spell's a 10 out of 10. I can't say anything else about it. You really got to listen to this one. It's one of those moments, one of those like solid gold moments where even if the rest of the album was shit, this would be worth the price of admission because it's that fantastic. And I don't know, maybe it's just me because again, I feel like not a lot of people love this song as much as I do, but I totally think it's one of their greatest songs, if not their best song. So anyway, it's all a matter of opinion at the end of the day. But yeah, guys, that's Demons and Wizards. Definitely one of their most classic albums. The lineup really solidified with this one. And although it is like a little bit on the lighter, more melodic side than the previous albums, it's still just great from start to finish. And you honestly can't go wrong with this one. I think I've said everything I have to say about it, guys. So definitely stay tuned for more videos. As always, I appreciate you guys watching. Now, here's the thing. I don't know what I'm going to be doing when I'm going to be doing more Uriah Heep. I'm at the Magician's Birthday at this point. And although that, as I mentioned, that's a great album, I'm not, as enthusiastic about it as I need to be to make a full-length review. So I don't know. We'll see if it grows on me, but I'm not really planning on reviewing it anytime soon. So sorry if you guys are into this Uriah Heep series, but we'll see what happens. I definitely want to review more albums by them because they're such a fantastic band. Definitely one of my major discoveries of 2020. And yeah, I know how crazy that sounds because they've been around for fucking millions of years, but I really want to see them live one of these days when this whole coronavirus thing blows over. I'll be the first one to buy a ticket, I'll tell you guys. I'm telling you. But yeah, guys, thank you so much. And as always, peace out. Truly appreciate you watching. Take care.